Well, Tex, I'm excited to chat with you tonight. For folks that are new here, welcome to Retro Chatter. This is the official Returning Retro podcast. My name is Jake, and I've got a real treat tonight to be talking with Tex. I have to say I loved your recent Crackberry article. I thought it was so and it was so interesting for the viewers and the listeners. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. But it is so interesting to hear how would I even describe you, my friend? Like someone who works in AI and yet is like an AI skeptic, an AI cautionist. I don't know, but
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining me tonight. Let's just jump right into it. Tex, tell us a little about yourself. How what well maybe what drew you into pursuing a career in artificial intelligence?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks, Jake. Before I jump into that, I just want to say it's an honor to be, here. Super excited about returning retro and the community that you're building. And so I'm super thrilled to be here with you tonight. Yeah, as you said, I'm a bit of an insider. I work in AI. Writing the article was a lot of fun as somebody kind of on the inside seeing how AI is being used and marketed, and some of the ways in which we're already seeing people be drawn to use AI. And you should go read the article if you haven't already. Go do that. I won't rehash it here. But in my time in AI, I think it's been a whirlwind. I was very fortunate. I got a Ranger flag behind me. I was fortunate to serve in the United States military for a time, and then right after that, moved into the artificial intelligence world. And this is kind of before the big boom. So this was back when, before we had Chat GPT, before any of that stuff. Really, I
Oh,
got in, and so I kind of stumbled in at the right time. I got in
okay.
right kind of on the ground floor, um, and it's been a wild ride ever since.
Okay. Well, I have to thank you for your service. It means a lot to me on a personal level. Thank you so much for that. I am curious. So straight out of the military, jumping into AI, how did that happen? I mean, if in as much as
Yeah.
you can disclose, but how did
Yeah,
that
yeah,
happen?
yeah.
Like, what drew you in? What was the opportunity? I'm always really curious to see how people find themselves in the space that they're in.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but prior to joining the military, I did my undergrad. So I finished college. I had a degree in accounting, which is exciting.
Yeah,
Uh, you know,
fellow
so that's right.
accountants.
That's right. I did an accounting degree. Joined the military, and really on the way out, really felt like what I was doing in the military wasn't what I wanted to do. When I got out, and so
Mm,
looking around at different opportunities, I realized that software development and data analytics and data science was something that I was interested in and had kind of started to teach myself. And so I was able to take what little experience I had there and combine it with some of the connections that I had made in the military to kind of get a first job doing some contracting as a data scientist. And a lot of that really was leveraging more my military skills than my data science skills. But from there, was fortunate enough to just be put in the right place at the right time on the right projects. Got a lot of good experience, and then now I've moved out, obviously, into the private sector, doing AI out here. So yeah, that's kind of how I made the move.
for the viewers and the listeners, you and I, our paths crossed pre Crackberry article, and I'm even trying to think, was it in, it must have been in one of the forums or one of the Discord chat servers in kind of the intentional tech space. Was that what? Help me
Yeah,
remember. Maybe do you recall? Was it? I can't remember if it was a BlackBerry thing, if it was a minimal phone, if
I
it was.
I think it was this guy.
Was that
I
what?
think it was the
Okay.
middle phone. I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
So this is okay because I couldn't. I was like, oh, because there's so many different spaces, and it's kind of fun for me. And maybe we can talk about this later on. It's really exciting for me to see this new. Some people call it digital minimalism. Some people call it the digital detox movement. Intentional tech is the term that has kind of stuck with me.
yeah.
So working in AI, and again,
Mhm.
maybe I'm the only person that feels this way, but for me, someone working in AI, not just using AI, but like developing AI, working in AI, such as yourself, finding you drawn to intentional tech, it seems almost contradictory to me. How did that how
Yeah.
did that happen? How did you find yourself being drawn into this, I don't know, contradictory space of intentional tech while you work in AI?
Yeah, you make a great point, and I think that I get that question a lot when they're talking about my phone or I have a Game Boy. I'm often seeing the Game Boy or an iPod, and people wonder how do you kind of hold those things in tension in your mind? And I think one thing about AI that I love is that it really has opened up the ability for us to learn and ask questions and ask sometimes what we might think are dumb questions that we maybe wouldn't ask another human. We can ask ChatGPT and get a good answer.
Interesting.
You
I
know,
had
I,
not ever thought of that before.
yeah, well, just let you in on this is how I use AI, I guess,
Okay.
right? Um, but I think there's also a lot of things that AI probably isn't all that good for. And so, the one of the promises, seeing some of the big players out there and the way that they're marketing AI is that it can, in some senses, replace human interaction, replace human activities. And I don't know that I would say that that is a good, responsible use of AI. And so, increasingly, as our devices kind of continue to get loaded up with AI features and as we get pushed towards using AI in ways that personally are not for me, I actually find that being more intentional is a way that to push against that. So,
Mm.
I wrote this in the article. I'm not against AI. I think AI is actually super useful. There's a lot of great uses for it. I don't think it should be everything. And so I think intentional technology is one way in which we can put AI where in its place and then put the other areas of our life kind of in their place and divide things up that way.
Sure. No, that's actually something that I have wrestled with a little bit, just in terms of how I view AI. And again, I say AI just because that seems to be the prevailing term. Whether it's the large language model or I don't even know all the terms that exist for it. But I have thought of that. It's like, well, some of these things are great. I mean, I love that I can use AI to transcribe my videos and I don't have to meticulously listen back and type everything out, stuff like that. But some of the other things, I mean, I don't know if you saw this, but there was an ad. In fact, I was talking to a friend of mine about this a few months ago, where it was like, was it a video? It was using AI to like make a Christmas card or make I don't know. It was used in a way that was like more of a replacing that person's, I don't know, creativity. Or it was just so bizarre to me. And that was the first time I was like, whoa, like that person is using AI to do very human stuff. I don't know. It just made me kind of concerned. Well, if there's all these things that you could do with AI, but maybe you shouldn't, are we going to see more of that than using it for what you quote unquote should? In your time so far, I mean, working in AI for a couple of years now, do you share some of those concerns, or is like, nah, Jake, it's all just, there's no worries whatsoever, it's all just going to be a gravy train, no risks with AI whatsoever?
That's a good question. And I like to start all of these conversations by saying that ultimately this is going to be up to you as a user of AI to determine what is right for you. And so what might be right for Tex and what might be right for Jake may not be right for whoever this is that's viewing this right now, and that's okay. I think my encouragement to anybody who's interested to know what should I do with AI is just to think deeply about the ways in which you're using it. I think back to maybe 15 years ago or however long it was when kind of social media started to take off. And
Mm,
if you were anything like me, you didn't really think twice about diving in headfirst to whatever the newest app was and getting involved in all the communities. And I think for some of us, we look back, especially in the intentional tech community, we look back and we say, man, if I could have done it differently, knowing what I know now, I
yep.
might have taken it slower. And I do think that there's a sense in which we will look back on the use of AI in 5 or 10 years. And I think a lot of people will have this experience of thinking, man, I was really letting AI handle a lot of these creative tasks, a lot of things that make me who I am, and I passed it off to AI. I kind of lost out on that experience or on those opportunities to be myself and instead let ChatGPT do it. So, yeah, I do share some of those concerns, Jake. And my encouragement is again, I don't know that I would say that Tex has 7 rules for AI. I would just say, there's ways in which we can think deeply about how we're using AI so that we don't look back with regret, I think 5 or 10 years down the road.
And I think that's honestly such a great comparison. Like I thinking back to, the early, well, back when it was still called social networks and
Yeah.
not social media. So let's say 2008, 2009, and then all of a sudden the like button is invented, the share or the retweet is invented, and then, fast forward to today and it's the entire Western society is so different now. And I think that, I mean, again, I'm not an expert, I'm not an analyst, I'm not a statistician or anything, but I think you could probably trace a lot of the more negative aspects of the culture we kind of find ourselves all dealing with today right back to those two new technologies, if you could call them that. I'll be honest with you, like I am concerned that and I even saw I was listening to something the other day. I don't know if if it was Microsoft or maybe it was it Meta or Alphabet had like commissioned a study that itself found its own AI tools was leading into a reduction in critical thinking abilities, or maybe it was creativity. What I would hate to have happen is, people just start to keep, I use the term outsourcing to AI parts of their humanity, things that will, with habitual use, objectively make them a less human, if that makes sense. And I don't know, it's a concern of mine.
Yeah. So the two most impactful books that I read this year would recommend to folks are The Anxious Generation
Mm.
and The Comfort Crisis, which I believe is a few years old now.
Hmm.
But both of those books had a unique impact on me because they highlighted the ways in which technology is negatively affecting us as humans. The Anxious Generation, specific around social media,
Mm.
and folks who are right around the Gen Z age that came into middle school, really right when social media was taking off. And the Comfort for Crisis is more largely just talking about how, if you think about how we've evolved as humans, so much of the human experience for the past, I don't know, 15, 20,000 years has been you do a lot of work for very little reward. You chase the buffalo for days, for ultimately not that much satisfaction at the end whenever you get the takedown. So much of what it means to be human has been putting in a lot of work and stressing yourself a lot for very little reward. Technology and AI flips that on its head. The promise is no work and all the reward. You put in less and less and less work and you get the same amount of that same dopamine hit. And I think what we're seeing is that has not the promise has not been delivered. That as people have spent less and less time using their brain to, whether it be write or create or consider things that maybe before AI you had to think deeply about. Now I can just fire off a prompt and get a response back. I do think we're starting to see the negative effects of that, as you mentioned, whether it be critical thinking or creativity.
Sure.
And again, not to be prescriptive, but I think those are just things you have to be aware of. If you're choosing to use AI, just be intentional about what you're going to use it for and what you're not, so you can avoid that kind of stuff.
Well, and I think that, yeah, and that's great. And for me, and maybe you can relate to this, having a background in accounting as well. I like the prescriptiveness. It
Mhm.
is helpful for me to kind of establish sort of a framework, or
Yeah.
maybe a better, maybe like guardrails would be
Mhm.
a better term. So if I were to come to you, retro Jake, text, man, I don't know, like this is all crazy. Like I don't, what would you say would maybe be a good rule of thumb, or maybe some things for people to watch out for? I mean, obviously it's going to be different for everybody, but certainly there has to be some kind of like broad strokes, framework that they can apply to their decision making in terms of, should I use AI for this, should I not use AI for this,
Yeah.
is this going to, is habitual use of this going to turn me into more or less a doom scrolling zombie? What advice would you give someone in terms of, okay, here's Texas prescription for how to not get sucked in to the negatives of AI? Not
Yeah.
to put you on the spot.
No, no, that's a great question, and I've thought about this a lot. The best that I have come up with is maybe 2 by 2 grids. So you could think of, you have an x-axis and a y-axis. You could think of your x-axis as that's this one, as things that involve the human spirit. I think I have a hard time maybe defining what the human spirit is. I think we all might, But generally, something like engaging with my spouse over dinner, that is a highly spiritual activity for me. I'm very engaged. Maybe something like, I don't know, combing through my emails. That is a low spiritual activity for me, you know. So I'll draw those two kind of extremes. The y-axis might be what I would think of as the more human, and by human I don't mean spirit and human are different. And that human I would say is how much does this involve someone else? If there's an activity that
Oh,
involves other people, that would be a high human activity. If there's an activity that really involves me and me alone, that's I would say it's a low human activity. So you can think of a grid, kind of the X and Y axis, things that end up in the high spiritual, high human realm. Those are activities that I would say you should stay far, far away from using AI for those things. Examples being, I think I give one in my article. If you're somebody who's like sitting down to write a love letter to a spouse or a partner, you're sitting down and thinking of ways in which you can engage your kids. You're thinking about ways in which you need to respond to a friend or coworker you're in conflict with. I think those are highly spiritual, highly human activities. There's a lot of work cognitively that goes into thinking through and deciding those things and writing those things down, we'll say. But I think those are the things that are most important that we keep human. On the other side of the scale, you might think of, yeah, if I'm doing a search, if I'm trying to find what did I spend the most money on with my credit cards this month, I probably don't need to sit down and go over the statement. I think that those are things that it may be good to save you some time. Just put that in ChatGPT and ask a question, get a response back. So, if I was to offer a framework, it would be that. Think of your grid. Is this a high human activity? Does this involve other people? Is this a high spiritual activity? Does this involve me and who I am as a person? Let's stay away from AI. Then the other side of things, I think you're a little bit safer, and you maybe won't turn into the doom scrolling zombie as you said.
gotcha. Okay, yeah, not to throw any labels out there, but that
Yeah,
was just
that's right.
because I've fallen prey to that myself. Not so much with AI yet, and hopefully ever, but part of my sort of wake up moment, kind of coming out of the slumber was real. Like I had started doom scrolling on social media, accomplishing essentially nothing, and a lot of my maybe emotional skills or creativity had started to atrophy. And so I'm like, man, I definitely don't want that to happen in some of these other areas as well. But at the same time, if I'm reading you right, you're not telling me I need to like go back to like a checkbook and make a register and track things that way. Like I'm okay to just to use the electronic and even maybe AI tools for that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think a big part of this conversation too is it's not a I make a decision today and then never think about it again. I think so much of this, much like our use of social media or other forms of, technology, is going to be kind of a constant assessment of yourself, of your own habits, your own kind of internal how you're feeling about what you're doing. And it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to revisit activities that you've been doing and say, hey, maybe this isn't the best thing for me. I need to back away. And as we continue to see more AI tools enter the market and be kind of engaged in our everyday life, I think it's okay for us to continue to adopt more of those as we ourselves come to understand what AI is doing to us. Like I said, it's less so that I'm against AI and more, hey, don't dive right in. Don't dive into the deep end yet. We don't really
Sure.
know what this is doing to us. Let's take our time and use intentionality as
Yeah.
we engage with AI.
No, I love that, and I think that your grid is such a great way, just as sort of a like a rule of thumb or something for it's like okay, because this is really new to a lot of people, but for you and me, it's new at a time of our lives that is still somewhat like we can navigate it, I think, somewhat wisely. But I do, worry about younger generations if they come up in it and they don't know any, because we know the before and the after, similar to, social media. We know the before and the after, similar to, smartphones or even high speed internet to a large extent. We kind of have that gift of perspective, whereas upcoming generations probably won't. So I like those prescriptions, like the one
Yeah.
that you gave. That's very helpful. So I'm going to ask you a couple of tough questions. Well, one of them maybe not as tough, but one of them a little bit tougher. It's a 1-2 question. What about what you have seen using and or working in AI makes you the most optimistic about the future, either for yourself or even just mankind at large?
Yeah. So I think one thing that AI has done, and as you mentioned earlier, AI is very broad, and so I think when I'm saying AI in this context, I'm really talking about ChatGPT or Claude, the large language model kind of flavor of AI.
Sure.
I think
Okay.
that it's really democratized the information space. Even when with search engines and Google, you can find a lot of information. You do have to spend a lot of time clicking through a lot of links to find a little bit of information. Some of that research is good for you. It's good to kind of, nug through things. But I think that what I'm excited about is how, you know, these large language models, as they get better and better, they're really opening up people's minds and opportunity to learn new skills, learn about new things. I myself, I've learned so much about the field of natural language processing and large language models through LLMs, through asking questions and asking to
Oh,
explain things a
interesting.
certain
Okay.
way. So yeah, I would really encourage people. I do think that LLMs or AI is a great way to learn new things. You can always, if you're trying to discover something new, I love asking, "Hey, can you explain this complex thing to me?" But explain it using analogies from everyday life, or explain it to me using an analogy from football. And AI is really good at doing that. I think it's a
Sure.
great way to learn things the way that you best learn. I think LLMs are a great way to do that. That's one of the things I'd say I'm most optimistic about with AI.
Okay. So to kind of flip that question right on its head, and everyone learns a little bit differently. The counterpoint to that would be, well, but does that make it so that people are incapable of learning any other way?
Mhm.
What are some of your worries? Like what are some of the things that you're like, oh, this is concerning? I mean, just as an example, something that I've kind of thought about with these is, anytime there's a new technology, there's going to be major shifts in like the job market, for example. I have to admit, I'm a little concerned with AI because these are things where it's like there are entire industries that could be replaced by AI. Whereas before, you kind of had a little bit of a shift where it's like, we went from horse and buggy to automobiles, and probably soon it'll be autonomous vehicles or whatever. But that's all, one thing. Whereas this is like, the accountant is replaced. The lawyer is the coder, the software dev is replaced. I don't know. I mean, I haven't really researched it. This is something I've really been excited to talk to you about because I'm not in the field, and the field itself is relatively new. Is this that I've just described kind of a valid concern or not? And what are some of your concerns that maybe we're not quite ready for in terms of the AI revolution?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I guess I'll answer your question first before I maybe share mine. I think the answer is we just don't know. The promise of AI
Ah,
has been that, hey, if your company spends a lot of money on AI, you will get all these returns. You won't have to employ as many people, and so like you're saying, people will be put out of jobs because AI will replace them all. Thus far, we haven't seen that happen. As
hmm.
companies has spent a lot of money on AI. Undoubtedly, there may be viewers who that has been their fate and AI has replaced them. But by and large, the return on AI has not met kind of the investment that companies have made. And so I do
Interesting.
think
Okay.
I do think that AI is going to fall short of the promise that, hey, you no longer have to employ accountants or lawyers or research firms. You can just have a ChatGPT enterprise subscription for a few grand a year, and that will replace them all. I actually I don't think that's going to be the result of kind of the AI revolution. I do think that it's going to change very much so the way that people work. You mentioned software developer as an example. Someone kind of in that realm, AI has absolutely changed the way that I work because I don't spend as much time writing line by line by line as much as I maybe write a framework for what I want, a piece of software to look like. And then I kind of work collaboratively with a coding assistant to kind of build that out for me. And it happens a lot faster, but it's very different. And it's something where if I was unwilling to learn that skill, I do think that I would be somebody who would be replaced eventually by AI. And so as folks undoubtedly are experiencing, maybe your company, or if you're someone who's running a company, maybe some of your shareholders or backers are pushing I do think it is worth your time to learn and to get exposed to AI and experience how it could maybe help you in your daily job. Because I do think over the long run, the people that know how to use AI are going to be more valuable than folks who push it away and want it to just go away. I don't think it's just going to be going away. So
Right.
that's, I guess, how I would answer that.
So I think that's a good point. So I guess as a follow-up question, you'd mentioned that the investment, the return hasn't really quite met the investment, or maybe the promise has not been fulfilled. And I understand, like, this is brand new, all of this, for relatively speaking. Why? Why is the promise not being fulfilled? Why is it that people are still hiring, mostly, human workforces when AI could do it? Is it that AI actually can't do it? Is it that it's just not the job output is not of sufficient quality? Is it people are still too, like, sketched out about AI to do it, or is it something else? Why is the promise not being fulfilled,
Yeah.
quote unquote?
Yeah. I think there's a number of reasons, and if we're talking specifically right now, I think corporate America, I will say, viewers may be coming from other places. That America is what I know. I think what we're
Sure.
seeing corporate America is that companies who want to employ AI, they bring in AI, they sign a big contract, they have access to AI, but the important thing is not that you have access to AI. It's that you have the ability to take the important data in your organization and use AI to enrich it, to make people's lives easier, to answer questions faster. That's where the real payoff of AI comes. And so what we're seeing is that it's not even about the AI. If you could think of AI as the engine, and then you could think of your data as the fuel. The
Okay.
most important part right now is the pipes that connect the engine to the fuel, the infrastructure. And this is where I think that we're seeing an uptick start to happen, is companies investing more in the infrastructure of meeting their data with AI. I think largely that's kind of right now why I haven't delivered on the promise, is the infrastructure has not been there yet. As we continue to build those things out, I think we'll get closer. But then the other part of this conversation is that people like working with humans. You may not like working with all of the humans that you know, but that's a distinctly human experience. As I interact with you, we work together on a job, we get it done, we deliver it together to the customer's excited. There's a lot of humanity involved in that. And so I do think that as we've seen companies try to roll out AI, there's always going to be a need for that human touch point. There's always going to be a need for human interaction, human conversations. And so that's another thing that I think people thought, oh, AI will handle that. But I largely think people actually don't want AI to handle those sorts of things.
Sure. And that's actually a really interesting point, and I hadn't really thought about it that way before, but I I get so agitated when I have to call in for, like, some customer service or, like, technical support, whether it's on the phone or chatting, and I just know that I'm engaging with an LLM. I just it's I don't know, it's kind of different, like, when I seek out, AI to work on some, analytics, or some research, or whatever. It's different than when it's almost thrust upon me.
Yeah.
So that's actually a really good point. I hadn't really thought of that before, but yeah, I think, I've wondered about that, if we as humans will almost, even if it's, much less expensive to implement some of these AI tools, still choose the more expensive human, despite, because I mean, humans by our very nature are social. Like, even the most antisocial people still, whether they even whether it's a subconscious thing or a conscious thing, are enriched by interaction with other people. And I don't know. I hadn't really thought about this. I'm glad you came on, Tech. This is making me feel a lot better.
It's good.
So it's the moral of the story so far is, we're not gonna all lose our jobs yet, and when it does happen, it might not be as extreme as we think.
Mhm.
Is that okay? Cool.
Yeah.
So another thing that I kind of wanted to ask about is, do you think? I mean, this is something that I don't know if it's like I don't know if I'd call myself a pessimist, but it's, I enjoy human creativity, meaning I have always just enjoyed. I mean, even like live performances, whether it's a dance performance, a ballet, plays or things like that. Not to mention the countless movies that I've seen or albums that I've listened to. I really have been drawn to all of the varying forms of the arts, kind of because I'm not super artistic as much as I would want to be. But I wonder, as we start to see AI used in a lot of these artistic or creative spheres, are we going to start to see more backlash against that? I mean, I do have to wonder if it's like at some point there's going to be like the human made stamp, like the made in America or the as seen on TV, if that's even still a thing. Do you think that's the direction things could go, like human made or no AI here type of a thing, or is it just going to be so ingrained in things that that's just probably never going to be the extent that it goes to?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, if I was to ask you, or our viewers to go find your favorite piece of art, maybe in your apartment or in your house or something like that, and you brought it back, objectively, it may not be like the most beautiful piece of art, but hold on, it's funny, it's right over here. Like right now, like this is my favorite piece of art. This is from one of my
Ah,
daughters.
okay,
This is from one of my daughters, and there's something really beautiful about this because she made it for me.
sure.
And, you know, the I don't know if her artwork will get better. She's very young, so I assume that it will. Um, but I think there's something about, especially when we're talking about art, whether it's movies, media, or even art like that, where the feeling that, man, a human thought of me and made this thing is really powerful. And especially even thinking about movies, oftentimes we think about movies, they're made for a broad audience, but they're made for an audience. Very rarely do we see a movie that just hits everybody. Oftentimes movies are kind of geared for a specific audience, and the hope is
Sure.
that that audience will love and appreciate it and feel seen by the director and by whoever created this piece of art. And so I think that there's always going to be a desire for that experience. And again, your mileage may vary. You may be really excited by an AI thought piece or an AI generated movie. But for me, I do get more excited thinking about artwork from my children, or a book that I know that an author spent a lot of time on, or even a movie. You hear about these movies that take years to shoot. I think there's something really powerful about that. So
Sure.
I don't know. I know for me, I will always probably prefer the human made art because I do think there's something really powerful about consuming that versus consuming something that was created by this black box of math.
Right. Well, and that's even as you say that, I know that there is also a lot of ethical consideration to be made around. I mean, maybe I'm not understanding it fully, but a lot of these are basically just derivative creations of stuff that exists out there on the internet already, whether it's been indexed by some database somewhere or just publicly available, art or music or whatever the case may be. So I don't know. Maybe plagiarism is too strong a word because it's definitely something that is different and unique, whether it's an image or I know that just this last week I've heard that there's some AI generated song that's like topping the charts or something like that. And so I just think about that when the output of the thing, quality wise, is the same or better, are people going to prefer it, or the cost is lower? That's another side of it as well. Or are they going to be more drawn to the thing, like you had said, that they know, like all the blood, sweat, and tears went into to the creation of? I mean, even before all of this, just speaking of my own, and I'm curious your thoughts on this. I often keep an eye out for handmade wares. Whether it's like don't know if you've ever seen Forged in Fire, but I made myself a knife a couple months back, and I mean this thing, like knowing what went into making this, like I treasure this thing, like I made it myself, but that applies in my case to things that someone else had made as well. Just something about knowing that they, as opposed to like a mass produced, like in effect. And I don't necessarily mean for everything. Like I don't think there's a lot of handmade cars that I could afford, or like handmade, but yeah, homemade food, handmade crafts, like those have always just kind of meant more to me. And oftentimes as much as I could afford to, like I would be willing to pay more for it. Um, do you think that that'll be the case with AI versus human made, or is it just going to be different now because of what we're talking about?
Yeah. Yeah. When I think about tying this back to intentional tech, there's something unique about, as a for instance, either a minimal phone or even something like a Game Boy. We could look at these pieces of technology and say there's better stuff out there. There's cheaper stuff out there. There's stuff that is more powerful. You know, that's gonna. I do think that there's gonna be AI stuff that is cheaper, that is prettier, that is more performant, but I don't know that I'm gonna say that it's better because
Sure.
there's something unique about having this device that doesn't connect to the internet that I can play Pokemon, or having this device that keeps me from scrolling on my phone, or whatever it is. And again, my intent's not to yuck anyone's yum. Do what makes you happy is what I would say. But I do think there's always going to be a market and people like us and like your viewers who are interested not in just doing the cheapest, the fastest, the most performant, most efficient thing, but maybe doing the intentional thing. And so I do think we'll always have room for that.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I just I appreciate you coming on because this is something that I have really just been wrestling with on a personal level lately, where it's like, how can I navigate it personally, but also, on a more macro level, what is the what and what is society going to look like? I used to say like 10 or 20 years from now, but with the rate of change and advancement, I am almost like, what's life going to look like 2 years from now, 3 years from now? One, maybe kind of a final question for now. And I mean, obviously, anything that you'd like to discuss, I'm happy to discuss it. But some areas that I've been really curious about where AI might just really, really be a game changer would be in things like research specifically in the fields of medicine, uh, physics. What's the term, like electrodynamic, like the use of power, nuclear technology, that kind of stuff. Has it, to your knowledge, has it been implemented? Has it started to be implemented in these fields yet? And if so, are we seeing advancements, or is good old man-powered research still the best way to go?
Yeah. So what's funny is actually those fields have been employing, I would say, AI much longer than kind of you and I, the everyday Joe, has been consuming AI.
Oh,
So,
okay.
and again, this is AI is such a broad term.
Yeah.
We can talk about it talking about art creation versus, writing me stories versus something like fraud detection. All of those can be AI, and they're all, I think we'd agree, they're all very different. But as far as AI goes in those fields, I think as computer processing has gotten faster and faster, it's so much faster to run experiments, to change variables and try again. There's a lot less need for live tissue to be able to do these experiments. You can often do things
Hmm.
kind of simulated using AI. So I do think we're going to continue to see growth as we have more and more access to GPUs and to the power behind AI. I think that's going to continue to improve. And then again, the big thing about large language models specifically is that they're so good at making connections between data points and pulling things together in a way that's coherent and cohesive and sounds like the way that people communicate. That's why it's so attractive. That's why it feels like magic, right? And so I think that the big kind of movement in AI coming is taking studies maybe from different labs from around the world and very quickly being able to say, hey, you guys found that thing, we found this thing, these two things are co-located, or there's a dependency there. We should continue to study that. I do think we're going to see those fields as they continue to adopt and learn the best ways to use AI. I think that's going to continue to move forward. And I do think those are the areas where the promise of AI, I'm hopeful, actually can be met. The AI can make our lives safer and better, and ultimately extend our lives and make us more pleasant human beings because of it.
And that's something I like that, and I think that's a great place to. Well, maybe one more question after this. I've been very, I've kind of been all over the place in terms of how I feel about specific. I mean, I have to say specifically like the consumer facing AI products, services, software, what have you, just because I just, I worry. I don't want AI to go the way of social media, where there's a lot of good, but so much nonsense that can come as a result of it. So yeah, this conversation has definitely helped me kind of view it in a much more optimistic and positive light. But that's something for me where I just anything, and this is kind of going back to in kind of a weird way, the same belief system or philosophy that motivated me to start returning retro in the first place is finding ways to live your life in a way that brings more of the human out and less of the doom scroll, the brain rot. So anyway, final question: is AI going to be the key that unlocks the human race expanding to the stars?
It's a great question. I think that I think we're reaching the limits of our current architecture for AI.
Okay.
There's people who run labs that would agree with what I'm about to say. There's people who run labs that don't agree with what I'm about to say. But what I would say, and I like, I know you meant probably literally going, colonizing Mars, but I like to think of the AI race as the moon race. We're trying to get to the moon. The moon being this AGI. So with AI, artificial intelligence, AGI is artificial general intelligence. Essentially, what that means is that we now have AI that is as smart as humans. This has been the big race for a long time. We're trying to get to it. And I would say that what we're trying to do right now is we're trying to get to the moon in a car. We started out, the car was driving. We've now equipped
Okay.
the car with wings. It can now take off. We can give the car booster engines. It can get very high. But I think ultimately we're going to need a rocket ship to get to the moon. I think we need something fundamentally different than the current AI architecture. For the nerds out there who understand the weights and the biases and parameters and all the AI words, you guys probably know what I'm talking about. But I would say that we're trying to get there in a car. I think we could probably get close. We could probably see the moon, but I don't think we're going to get there until we have a different architecture that's going to take us a little bit further.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. And again, I've heard this idea of artificial general intelligence, not to be confused with the AGI I'm more familiar with, the adjusted gross income on a tax return. But in any case, I always say please and thank you whenever I use one, just in case
That's
Skynet
right.
goes online and the
That's right.
Terminators. But anyway, Tex, it has been a pleasure of talking to you again. Excellent article over on Crackberry. I'll link to it here. But yeah, any parting thoughts for the good viewers and listeners at Returning Retro?
Not this time, Jacob. Thanks so much for having me. I'd love to be back anytime to talk about anything. Really love the community. Really excited about what we have going on, and I'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thanks, Tex.
Thanks.